These are the Waubesa wetlands, located at the southwestern end of Lake Waubesa, the third large lake in the chain of lakes along the Yahara River in Dane County, Wisconsin. Named one of 100 wetland gems by the Wisconsin Wetlands Association, they protect Lake Waubesa, sequester carbon and phosphorus, provide habitat for over 70 bird species and at least 11 mammalian species, and contain the nursery for the lake's northern pike. Nobody wants to harm the wetlands, but they are in grave danger from a proposed development that the city of Fitchburg wants to build in its northeast corner. This is the area east of Highway 14 and north of Haight Farm Road that Fitchburg calls its northeast neighborhood, which presently consists of a few houses amid farmland and forest. Most of it drains into Swan Creek, which runs into the Waubesa wetlands and Lake Waubesa. To better understand how the wetlands serve us, what's at stake, and how the development of Fitchburg's northeast corner would endanger this fragile ecosystem, we set out in canoes and visited all three creeks that refresh its southern end.
I'm Cal DeWitt, and I live in this marsh, some distance from here, about a mile between here and the origin of this marsh in Deep Springs. My expertise is mainly on this particular wetland, which is Waubesa wetlands, but I've done research on wetlands around the world. Waubesa wetlands has some important roles for us in Dane County. It's one of the major production areas for northern pike. It is, in fact, a major pike nursery. The young, which grow up here, escaping most of the predators until they're up to a size that they themselves can be predatory fish. We do have the crane in this marsh. It's a sandhill, and we have had in the last 4 years whooping cranes come through, but they have not yet resided here, as they probably did once a long time ago. Many other things are provided by this wetland. One is a source of pure water to the southern boot of Lake Waubesa. Waubesa is an unusual lake in the chain of lakes, Mendota, Monona, Waubesa, and Kagansa, because it has a dead end toward the southwest. The water actually flows from the upper part and then almost immediately right off to the east, about a third of the way down Lake Waubesa. If it were not for these springs that are feeding this area, that boot would become eutrophic, which means excessively nourished. It would have too much runoff, too much stagnant water. And the beautiful thing now is that this water that's coming from the springs, filtered through the deposits below us and coming out onto the surface, provides fresh water, and that fresh water pushes the other water up toward the exit at McFarland. So a major function of this marsh is to purify and maintain the clarity. It's easy to see a marsh as skin deep only. But as I studied this with my students, we began to realize that wetlands like this are great sequestering agents for carbon dioxide. These plants, of course, consume carbon dioxide in their photosynthesis, and this carbon dioxide is converted into plant material, which eventually will decay, at least in part, and form the soil beneath, which is peat, and we have 95 feet thickness there. What that has done is sequestered an immense amount of carbon. It's one of the things that helps stabilize the Earth's climate because of this happening at wetlands around the world. But another thing it's been doing each year is it's been taking out of the water phosphorus, which is a primary pollutant and nutrient, and this marsh has every 10 years taken out enough phosphorus that phosphorus, 10 years worth, would fully eutrophy Lake Waubesa. So we've been doing that here for somewhere around 10 to 12,000 years. There's a tremendous investment in property around Lake Waubesa, and interestingly, wise people in the past have decided not to build back tier upon tier, but to limit the construction of homes mainly just to the lakeshore. One of the concerns we have for this Yahara chain of lakes is that we do not use this great attractant, recreational and aesthetic attractant, to bring too many people into the immediate area so that the very thing that has been attracting us becomes a stinking pothole of excessive nutrification. We're at a point here near the mouth of Swan Creek where the evidence of disturbing inputs, runoff, stormwater, such as sediments and nutrients, are showing their presence by the vegetation present. The grass immediately behind me is reed canary grass, and you'll see that it extends up the creek for hundreds or thousands of feet. If you look at it as a plant all by itself, it's just remarkably adept at colonizing areas that are disturbed. But of course, what we're concerned about is that it shows all the areas that are highly disturbed by sedimentation. And here, that sedimentation is coming from the watershed. Development along Swan Creek, some of which is actually named after this creek, contributes runoff through stormwater that comes into the creek, and this carries with it nutrients, fertilizers, sediment, inundate this wetland. The water has a lot of suspended material in it. This is in the direction of a milk chocolate color. In fact, I have a picture of Swan Creek in flood at Lawler Road. It's all chocolate.
And we have that photo taken off of Beale Street after a storm that shows a huge mudslip in Lake Waubesa.
Now this is the breeding area for leopard frogs. In breeding season, which is coming up yet for leopard frogs, this has about 1 frog per square foot. And it's just riotous. It's really great to be out here when they're calling. This is now you can tell something about the shallowness. Now we're over 95 feet, but we have rhizomes of the white water lily in peat beneath us, so it's only about 4 to 8 feet deep.
After leaving the murky waters of Swan Creek, we headed up Deep Spring Creek. What a difference.
Well, we're here at one of the most beautiful features in the natural landscape in Dane County, Wisconsin. We're at the site of Deep Spring, which is part of a system of springs here on Deep Spring Creek. Deep Spring itself is a cone in the peat, about 15 feet in diameter, 12 feet deep. Actually, 25 feet down is the source. Around us here is native vegetation. Right next to me is a lovely plant called the bottle brush sedge. The reason for the name needs no explanation. And then just to the right of it, very short, is the arrowhead, which is a beautiful plant. This is a young one. It will grow tall and have white flowers. And then this plant might be confused with reed canary, but you see it's got a much finer structure. The leaves are narrower. The tops, the inflorescences are very, very fine. This is blue joint grass, not big blue stem. Blue joint grass, Calamagrostis. This takes the position of reed canary in a disturbed stream. So if you see Calamagrostis, blue joint, along a stream like we see here, it is an undisturbed stream. It is a stream that's not getting excessive siltation from upstream. Of course, it is growing in its ideal place. The fen behind me, F-E-N, the fen behind me is all fed by groundwater, just like Deep Spring here is fed by groundwater. And the vegetation here is really remarkable. There's about 30 acres of fen that has on it the very rare plant called the lesser fringed gentian. It's a beautiful plant. It requires plants around it actually to support itself because it's a wiry, frail thing, but it has a fantastically beautiful purple flower. A remarkable thing about Deep Spring is what covers its surface. Right now, what's covering the surface deep beneath us is this alga. It's green here, you can see. Most of it is on the bottom, but these plants here have been producing so much oxygen in a mass that the oxygen has bubbled out, and these Spirogyra have floated to the surface because of all the oxygen. At night, these will all sink again because the oxygen will be consumed by their own respiration. And here we have a great jewel, the jewel of Deep Spring.
Next, we paddled out of Deep Spring Creek and soon came to the mouth of Murphy Creek.
There's a tremendous contrast here with what we saw on Swan Creek. We're here on Murphy Creek, about 1,000 feet in from its mouth. And all along the way so far, we've seen very little reed canary. Occasionally there's a little patch, but you see here there's bulrush, there are cattails, there are also Calamagrostis, the blue joint grass, and pondweed beneath us rather than any Eurasian milfoil. And it's just a very, very different kind of environment than one that is hit hard by heavy sedimentation from upstream or heavy nutrient input. So Murphy Creek is an example of a creek that's in quite healthy condition. If we looked at the animal life here and the plant life in the stream itself, we'd also have confirmation of that. Also here are otters, beavers, muskrat, mink, weasels, gray fox and red fox, and of course there are white-tailed deer, then a whole array of small mammals, shrews, and mice and voles.
Hi, I'm Joy Zedler. I'm a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I hold the Aldo Leopold Chair in Restoration Ecology. My background is in wetland science, wetland ecology, wetland restoration, and restoration in general. Wetlands are probably the most valuable kind of ecosystem on Earth. The fact that wetlands can remove nutrients and contaminants from the water means that we can drink cleaner, safer, healthier water. But that's just one of many things they do. They support a lot of the native biodiversity, both plants and animals. They absorb runoff during storms and in between times so that we have less flooding. The flood peaks aren't quite as high. And a host of other things like recreation, cultural values, just scenic beauty, which is why we are in a place like Lake Waubesa. So here we have a very precious resource. And the problem that we have is that even though wetlands are extremely useful and valuable on a per hectare or per acre basis, there aren't very many hectares or acres, that is, across the globe. These are really rare kinds of ecosystems they cover less than 10% of the earth. And so all of that activity is accomplished by a very small portion of the landscape. So the wetlands that we do have are precious, and they need to be protected and conserved. And treating them as though they are waste disposal systems is not the best way to retain all of those ecosystem services. The services are things that people value that are provided by natural ecosystems. They are in support of human well-being. The best management practice that most developers and municipalities rely on is to dig a pit. Although the detention pond or retention pond is a best management practice for many, it's only a partial kind of a treatment. It's like a small Band-Aid on a big wound, and it doesn't do all of the job. However, it is something that's easily done and it's easily measured, so you can see why it would be popular. That doesn't mean it does the job that's needed. So we have a regulatory system that's based on what's quick and dirty, and the water still is dirty. It may look clean, but clear water is not necessarily clean water.
My name's Tracy Hames. I'm the Executive Director with Wisconsin Wetlands Association. We've been out all morning on one of the truly wetland gems of Wisconsin. It's very important that we look at the good wetlands we have, the high quality ones, especially the ones of the quality of this area, and do everything we can to protect them. Now, to protect a wetland doesn't just mean protecting the wetland itself. The wetland water comes from other places. So to protect the wetlands that we have here, not only do we have to protect the actual wetland itself, but we have to do everything we can to make sure that the water that is flowing into the wetland remains pure, remains clean. So the point is we have to take care of our upper watershed areas. When we come in and develop areas and put in what we call impervious surfaces, if you put in impervious surfaces, allow all that water to wash off at once, it'll overwhelm the ability of the creek to process that water. You'll cause erosion, you'll cause enlargement of the creek channel itself, and that leads to the channel digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And where does all that sediment go that comes off the land from the flashy runoff events? It all ends up in the flat portion of the watershed, and that's where the wetland is. But we need to manage our development in ways that protect the resources that we have here. It's much easier and cost-effective to protect the good things we have now than to try later on to restore them back to some quality. So let's protect the high-quality wetlands we have right now by planning our development in ways that protect the water flowing off the land into this incredibly unique, high-quality wetland gem.
Help us protect the Waubesa wetlands. The decision on whether to permit development in Fitchburg's northeast corner now rests with the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, CARPC, and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Please contact the CARPC commissioners today by emailing them at allcommissioners@capitalarearpc.org to ask them to deny Fitchburg's application to develop the northeast neighborhood. The risk to the Waubesa wetlands and Lake Waubesa is just too great. Thanks to all of the people who made this video possible, including all the volunteers and donors to the West Waubesa Preservation Coalition since 2005. Have to get back. Let's see if we don't see a beaver dam around this corner, we're going back.
We're in a wetland. It's hard to get me out of a wetland. That's my problem.
We'll cancel all meetings. We've just discovered 8.